Today's show is sponsored by Adventures Unlimited Press. Take your mind on a literary journey and go to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from our famed experts right here on Truth Be Told. That's adventuresunlimitedpress.com.
What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome back to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and with me now, world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor.
Hi, everybody. We have more mysterious, spooky things that go bump in the night with author, psychic, and paranormal researcher, Debra Robinson.
Debra, or Reb, Robinson is an author, musician, and songwriter. Her first book, A Haunted Life, The True Ghost Story of a Reluctant Psychic, was released in 2013, and The Dead Are Watching was released in 2014. And her latest book, Red Death, has hit the Amazon Top 100 best-selling list.
Debra is currently working on its sequel, Red Death Survivors, and she's contracted to also begin a regional book on true hauntings. And did you know that Debra grew up in haunted houses as a teenager, Tony?
I did not.
I did not either, but guess what? Her memoir explains the terrible consequences that may follow such haunted experiences. Now, Debra believes that everyone is in a battle against invisible forces, and we can't wait to ask her more about that. She also feels that our trying to interact with these forces can often be spiritually or even physically dangerous. To learn more about this, please put your hands together and welcome Debra Robinson, our psychic and our paranormal researcher.
Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for being here. You know, we might as well just keep this party going and keep them scaring these bejesus out of people that are listening and watching us today.
That happens.
I know. Well, you know, I'm the only one that really can't say I'm a psychic because, you know, the guest we had on before is a psychic. Eddie's a psychic. But that doesn't mean people can't see spirit. Or sense spirits. And so let's get a background check on you, on where you got started as a psychic medium, and when did you see your first spirit, your ghost?
Especially growing up in haunted houses.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of one of those stories where, and I found this a lot. I don't know whether Eddie had dealt with this as well, but a lot of times it seems to, that psychic streak seems to run in families. I don't know. There's so many different ideas on that and trains of thought as far as, you know, whether it's right-brained types. The artistic types seem to be more open to those sorts of things, and so your family usually encourages that sort of thing. Others believe that it's just that everybody can see them. It's just that they shut it off after a young age because the rest of the world either, you know, looks down on it or makes fun of us or whatever.
Right.
But in my case, it ran in my family. But my grandmother and my great grandmother and all that, they were very religious. In fact, my grandparents were Quakers, which is a real strict religious Protestant sect here in our area in the Midwest, and yeah, they were very much against the whole psychic thing, and they didn't call it psychic abilities. They just basically said it was, you know, a spiritual gift, like in the Bible. So I kind of grew up with this being a normal thing, although they didn't call it psychic things. And my grandmother, we would gather around at Sundays, and she would say, you know, she had the dream again, and everyone would kind of stop in their tracks, and here she would dream of a big white bird that came through her bedroom window every time somebody was about to die.
Oh.
So, you know, we'd all think, you know, all the kids were terrified, of course, you know, and we were looking around at each other and wondering, you know, who's next. And, you know, it was always the same details that she would dream. And sure enough, usually 3 or 4 days later, you would hear that somebody died. Luckily, it was usually one of the old relatives from West Virginia or somewhere that we didn't know.
Right.
That helped a little, but still, it was a normal thing, and she just believed it was a gift from God, you know. I saw things, and I would have precognitive dreams when I was really young, you know, early 3, 4, 5 years old, and I would dream of things like one year I had a dream about a doll whose hair that you could pull out. It would grow from short hair to long hair, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So, you know, I asked for that doll from Santa Claus, you know, and my parents told me later on they searched everywhere for it. Well, the doll wasn't invented till a year or two after that, and then I got one, but you know, I was dreaming about things that were relevant to a child that age, you know, so that's the kind of thing it manifested in me originally in my life. It wasn't until I was about 12 or 13, my brother and I got a Ouija board for Christmas that I asked for, and so that stirred some things up, I think, or some people don't believe it stirs things up, but in our case, I really do think it kind of opened some door that should probably have remained closed, especially with a little bit of a psychic streak.
Right.
So that was when we first started having these problems in this house, and we lived in this house for almost 3 years because my parents, of course, my mother was, you know, it's either demons or nothing, you know. So there was no gray area in between.
Right.
So basically, things were scratching on my bed, you know, on my fitted sheet in bed with me. Just terrible, horrific B-movie, horror movie type stuff going on. It was pretty much 3 years of terror, and we lived there until my mother started waking up at night with this old man bent over her. And after that happened 3 or 4 times, we moved. So it wasn't until things started to mess with them that they believed there was something there.
That is so.
That was my first experience that was really horrifying.
Yeah, isn't it funny how that works? You know, it's your imagination. You were dreaming. You're tired. You're stressed. Oh, hell, there's a dead man standing over my bed. We move it.
Yes, absolutely. It's
Get
like,
the car, Blanche.
that's
Get the
pretty
car.
shocking.
Yeah. Hey, did you guys have a basement in that house?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That feels like there was some creepy stuff there, too, huh?
Well, my brother used to go down there and build his little things and everything, and he would hear, there used to be an old room off to one side, you know, with the dirt floor, what they used, this is an old house, probably a 100-year-old house, but
A lot of dirt
they
floor.
used to, you know, keep their canned goods,
Oh,
their
yeah.
bottled goods, you know, cool in the winter and
Right.
stuff. So
And meat.
they would
Right.
put it in that little room. Well, he would go down there, and he made up the front room for his own little space that he could work on things and build model rockets and things like that. And then he would hear things moving around on the shelves in that room in the back. He would think that my mom had come down to get something for supper because the basement was, you know, kind of around off the back porch there. You had to open a hatch. And, you know, he would think that it was her, and he'd go in there, and there was never anything there. And then he could always tell when he would walk down there that it was kind of a real thick feeling, you know, when he'd walk in there, if he was going to hear the jars move that day or not.
He could feel it by just gut instinct, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he could feel it easily when he'd walk in there. He said it was just kind of a thick feeling, you know. I didn't go down there. I couldn't handle it at all, and so I didn't go down. But he claimed that this is what he always heard, and he could always feel it in advance.
Debra, were you the kid that had the imaginary friend too?
You know, I did not. I did not have that. I had a good imagination and everything, but I just didn't have the imaginary friend. Did you have something like that you think was actually a spirit?
Oh, yeah. It turned out it was my sister. I'm a twin, and
Wow.
Mom had a miscarriage, and she thought that was the end of the pregnancy. And then 5 months later, here comes little gay Houdini. And so I played with her on and off, literally all the way up until I was 10 years old. And the first time I can consciously remember meeting her was a fight my parents were having. And Mom was pregnant with Terry. Bobby was asleep on the sofa, and I was in the kitchen helping Mama because I was a mama's boy. And then my dad came home. They got in a huge fight, and someone pulled my arm underneath the big table with the metal legs, and it's this little girl, and we were sitting there together just all huddled up, and when the fight was over, I looked over to her, and she was gone. And that's the first time I remember meeting my little sister. But
How old were you?
I was probably 4.
Wow.
Yep. And then the lights and the angels and all of that stuff that came with it. Because I thought Mama was dead. I didn't know. She's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you had some of the same type of experiences.
I did not have that. I didn't really start to get into the full thing until this haunted house situation. And some even claim, that was poltergeist in nature. I don't know. The jury's out on that one. I'm not real certain about it, but I have different theories. But there are still people trying to decide whether or not poltergeist comes from someone's feelings inside them that are kind of like triggered and bouncing off the walls and causing things or not. And some don't believe that. So I'm kind of in the middle somewhere, I think.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, because there's so many terminology from ghost that's thrown out, poltergeist, demonic, this just a ghost itself. And so is there differences? And this, Eddie, or you can answer this, but, for someone like myself that doesn't know a lot about that, is there differences between each ghost and poltergeist and whatever else is out there?
There are some that are, and Eddie can also chime in on this, I'm sure, but there are, human spirits that are left here, or I believe that they can pop in and visit us, especially when there's a reason to or whatever. I believe that they can, that they're allowed to come from their dimension and visit us. And I believe that there are negative energies, and I believe that poltergeists can be triggered by someone's internal being upset or something like that, especially somebody who has a psychic streak. But in this particular case, I think that it was so personal of me, against me is what it seemed like, that I don't think that was the case. I think it was too personal. It was an actual human spirit of some type. Of course, I didn't know anything back in those days, so all I got from it was complete terrified, It was just terror the whole time. But yeah, Eddie, you may have something to say about that as well.
I feel the same way you do. I really do. I've had experiences where I've seen ghost, and it was like of the property owner that was on the property before my grandmother got it. And so I had seen the ghost. He always popped up whenever there was a thunderstorm because he died of a heart attack sleeping on the front porch, and that was the first time I met him as a, quote, ghost.
Wow.
And my mom saw him, my brother saw him. At one time, all my brothers were sitting, I was in the hospital, so my brothers were sitting at the kitchen table with Mama, and her mom, my grandma, was at the sink, which was really 2 5-gallon slop buckets, and washing dishes by the wood stove. And the man, Mr. Johnson, I guess, come walking right up in the rain and was wiping his feet on the porch and went to open the door. And Mama's like, to her mother, she said, Mama, you got company. And without even looking over her shoulder, Grandma's like, oh, that's old man Johnson. Don't bother him. He won't bother you. The door opens. He disappears, and everybody just sits there with their mouth open and eats their biscuits and gravy.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, I feel the same way you do. Did you ever, by chance, Deborah, see the movie An American Haunting with Sissy Spacek and Donald Sutherland?
Is that the one about the Bell Witch?
It's around the colonial era.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I think I was thinking of one about the Bell Witch cabin down in Tennessee, but I'm not. It's been a while. I don't know if that's the same one.
It literally could be based on that area of the country, but it is a little girl who was being molested by her father, who was the preacher.
Mm.
Oh, no, I didn't see that one then, I don't think.
And so the little girl, he molested her privately. Nobody knew about it, obviously, but the father and the little girl. And just as the little girl starts to literally go through puberty, he stops messing with her. But then the little sister, who is 10 years old, he starts to go mess with the little sister because it's safe to mess with her, because she's not gone through puberty. So the older sister's energy, which felt like trapped, suffocating, furious, angry, vindictive, they call it the most haunted incident in America. And so that energy went somewhere and picked up, quote, the quote, poltergeist frequency.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I remember seeing it, I think, years ago, but I can't remember entirely. I was going to mention, too, that you were talking about the man the former owner. I've always noticed on different investigations, and it makes a lot of sense, is that you get a lot more evidence and things like that happening during rain, because I'm assuming because it's a good conductor of electrical energy, which supposedly spirits are made of that. So.
Well, and I wrote down here on my piece of paper to ask Debra this question. I wrote water, question mark, and dam.
I just picked it up.
Yeah, totally. So I have it right here. I mean, I have evidence.
I see it.
And so I wondered, did you have some kind of a interesting incident or investigation around a dam, a water mill, something to do with water as a conduit of some sort in any of your investigations, or a personal experience with a ghost in that way?
You know, I've had a lot of things where when it was raining, we got a lot of evidence and things coming up. I actually had a situation during an investigation, probably been about 2 years ago now, with the Massillon Ghost Hunter Society, which is, I had worked with them as a psychic for a while, helping them out on certain cases, and I went with them to this little house up in our northeastern part of Ohio, above where I live here, and it was pouring rain the whole night, and they were using, of course, their devices and doing all the scientific end of things, and basically they had captured whenever I was telling people, they were talking about their daughters had used a Ouija board upstairs, and I told them it's usually not a good idea to do that, because sometimes, you can attract things that want to hang around for a while or whatever, and as I was saying that, the leader of this group was recording it, and then he sent me the EVPs the next day, and there were a lot of things that were coming through during that investigation, and as I was saying that, it sounded as though something was like this really low, deep voice was saying, usually not a good idea, right along with me, almost as though it was coming out of me, and it was just a very millisecond delay. And I'll tell you, that really scared me. I thought I was going to have to do some self-exorcism or something at that point. But that was a frightening incident, and that's one of the last things when it was a pouring rain thunderstorm where a lot of evidence came through.
Oh, remember the tin roofs back in the day, the older houses with the tin roofs?
Yeah.
You could hear the rain.
Yeah, that seems like it's a double conduit to me.
Yes, absolutely. That would definitely do it.
What's the scariest thing you've seen or had happen to you that, as an investigator, it just gave you the yin-yangs and you're like, I might have to put up my ghost investigation hat and do something else?
Well, I don't think anything tops the scary experiences I had, back when I was 12, 13 in that haunted house, simply because that was such a shock to find out there was more than they were telling us about in the world, that I don't think, and I think that's what set me off on this, trying to figure out what was going on the rest of my life. But I think that was the one thing, that was the scariest time of my life. Everything since then has been trying to approach it to understand, to calm those early fears because of the effect they had on me at that time. I lost my son. I don't know if you have it in my bio and stuff, but I lost my son 6 years ago to a drunk driver.
No.
And he started coming back after he passed. We never saw him except for several of them that were out. He had moved back home. He was getting ready to move out to L.A. actually, and he had come back home and to save a little money, and left his apartment and came back and moved out into the garage. And he hooked up this little Radio Shack camera so he could lie on his bed in the garage, and if somebody's coming down the sidewalk, he had it hooked up to a TV right there. He could see one of his friends approaching, and he'd get up and open the door, So, like 2 nights after he died, and before the funeral or anything, my husband, his cousin, and his best friend from L.A., who's a professional skater, a rollerblader, they were out there in the garage talking, and I was on the front porch sitting, and my cousin had come, and several other people were on the front porch that were dropping in and bringing food and, just commiserating with us, basically. And I was sitting there on the front porch, and I felt, and I hadn't seen my cousin for quite some time, and so I didn't want to be rude and interrupt her, but I felt this odd sensation on my ankle. It was a warm hand that grasped my ankle and held onto it, just gave it a little squeeze. And I looked down at myself and thinking, what in the world? And I didn't want to say anything because my cousin was talking and I didn't want to interrupt her. So I thought that was very strange, and it wasn't just a few seconds, enough time for my son to get around the corner of the house and back to the garage when I heard shouts from out back, and we went out. And here, the three, his cousin, his best friend, and his father were in the garage, and they saw this white shape come walking down the sidewalk, as though it was walking down the sidewalk, and it stopped in front of the man door of the garage, and they watched it on the video, on the TV screen. And then they ran out to the door, and by that time it was gone. And it just was one of those moments where I just felt certain it was him, and they did too. And that wasn't a scary thing. In a way, it was heartwarming that he came back to let me know everything was, he was still there and he was okay and all that. But, you go through all this soul searching, and he was, on top of the game and just at the happiest of his life when, he was taken out. So, you go through, as a mother, you go through all this soul searching and hoping they're not stuck, and you go through the spiel and go to the light and the whole thing, So, those first times when he came back, of course, I was still concerned, but, it got better and better, and finally he did go on to where he needed to be.
Wow. What was his name?
James.
Wow. The reason I'm asking that question is, was he going to come out here and do something with music or acting or possibly be on TV?
Oh, well, he was a great musician. In fact, I have an L.A. music publisher, Penn Music Group, who we put a CD of his songs together after his death and released it, and I sent them out to my music publisher out there in L.A., and he got one of my son James's songs in the Matthew McConaughey movie trailer of Killer Joe. Wow. So it's on every DVD sold, and and he'd have been thrilled, just thrilled with that. So yes, he was a professional rollerblader and also a really great musician and songwriter.
Wow.
Well, it feels like part of the reason I think he showed up the way that he did on the monitor was for all of the reasons you already know about. But it feels like he was destined to be known in his own right in the area that he was most passionate about, and he is now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes,
wow.
He was a very talented boy, very talented, 24 years old. It's such a shame.
That is a shame.
Starting his
life. This is going to be a weird question before we go to a commercial break in just a second, Debra. But did you, your husband, or your son, or any of your children have a weird incident with a kite, a K-I-T-E, a kite or something hitting a power line or tree or something weird like that?
No, he may have had something like that. I know he had some premonitions and things as well, and I think one of them involved a kite. I wrote about that in my first book, A Haunted Life, all the things that he saw in advance that were upcoming, and I didn't put them together. I think sometimes as someone with a psychic gift, you're protected from that. You can't see things about yourself and those too close to you, and I think that's a good thing because, if you can't do anything about it and it's meant to be, that's a terrible torment if you could see it. So afterwards I put them together, but of course beforehand I didn't.
I know this will sound nuts, and of course nothing sounds nuts because of what we do for a living, but I kept being told something to say something about the kite and some kind of a past incident, something odd with the kite that would make sense to you, but it didn't make sense to me.
Yes.
That's
so
cool.
I'm thinking that has to do with it.
Oh, my God.
Well,
getting goosebumps.
I know.
too.
No, I love when Eddie gets that in that tone right there. It's like, he gets some good stuff.
It's so
going.
much fun, though, because we have such great guests.
I know we do. Well, let's talk about some of your books. When did you start wanting to put the pen to the paper and writing?
Well, I was a professional musician and songwriter, and still am
right.
that. My entire life, from the time I was 14. So that's a very long time. And I wrote 3-minute songs to Nashville standards or LA standards, to use to send to my publishers. I had LA ones and Nashville ones. Mm-hmm. And, there are parameters in how you write songs, and that's the way it's done, and that's what I did. You have to paint a picture in 3 minutes. So you have to get
right.
good with using words in that way, And, of course, I learned it as best I can, being obsessed with, perfection and crazy perfectionism that I've always been dealing with, unfortunately. But so I was obsessed with that. And until this all started happening, shortly after my son died, my father, was a suicide. And that was, between both of those things, I thought, okay, I'm going to lose it, I'm losing it. I got to do something. So I sat down and I started putting together all of the incidents from the beginning, from the haunted house where I questioned, did something follow me, something bad, you know? I mean, you go through a lot of stuff when you lose your only child in that way, and, you know, people you love in those ways. So, you know, I went through it all. I just completely tormented myself and blamed myself for being involved in psychic things and possibly attracting negative, you know, what you can imagine what you would go through.
Yeah.
And I just started putting it all down and connecting all the dots and all the premonitions my son James had and all the things that were, you know, I mean, so many things. It reads like fiction because it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've had the things that, you know, real life can throw at you sound like fiction sometimes. I mean, you can't make that stuff up, you know. So, you know, that my son had written good songs. One of his songs, for instance, was one of the lyrics was, as close to tortured as I've ever been is lying here wondering if my heart might beat away and away and away. And he usually wrote happy songs, so I would say, well, James, would you write that? What's that about? And he'd just kind of shrug. Another time, right before he was killed, I went to his apartment before he'd moved home here, and he'd always dabbled in a lot of artistic things, and he had a big painting, like a 4-by-4 foot painting of this big, gigantic, bloody heart, you know, realistic-looking heart, you know. And I said, what in the world are you drawing that for? You know, it had like the arteries and veins and everything on it, you know. And he just shrugged again, you know. And he kept doing this, and then the time of his death, we found out he was an organ donor, and then about 8 months after that, we held a benefit for him in his name and a charity event in his name, and the man who got his heart came all the way from Massachusetts to meet us, and I knew him. I spotted him across the parking lot. I knew it had to be him, you know. And so he's still, 6 years later, he's still there with my son's heart, and I started putting it all together. He knew what was coming. Maybe he didn't know exactly, but he kept putting it out there, you know,
so
and trying to deal with it, or his spirit tried to deal with it without him, you know, intellectually understanding what was going on.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And
to
we
hear.
interpret it based on our personal life experiences, and he was
Sure.
so young, he was just channeling and not knowing what it was. There's a great book, by the way, called A Change of Heart, and it's based on a true story of this little tiny petite prim and proper upper crust persnickety ballerina who had a heart issue and got a heart transplant. And
I think I read that.
It did a
she
great-
lasted like 21 years at the time the book was written.
Absolutely. And then she got the heart of this 21-year-old drop-dead, gorgeous, motorcycle-driving, fast thing, eating chicken McNuggets and drinking beer at the pool hall. And she started acquiescing to his personality. And then they go in and scientifically talk about it. But physically, with physics and metaphysics, talk about, of course, the cells, atoms, and molecules connected to that personality. It's going to...
And my son's heart recipient, he never liked spicy food. My son was, you know, just crazy for spicy food, and now he eats all kind of spicy food and likes it.
Which, by the way, is really good for your heart.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Well, the books that you have look amazing. Unfortunately, I haven't read them yet.
But here's
Here's
the title of some of them: A Haunted Life, which is the true ghost story of a reluctant psychic. Hello.
That's the first one.
Yeah, and then you have The Dead Are Watching, which was released last year. And you have your latest novel is called Red Death. It's a post-apocalyptic thriller. Now, what inspired you to write that?
Well, you know, I had a dream about the Ebola pandemic and what could go wrong, you know, and what could happen. And so I decided to start writing some what-if type books. And so I delved into fiction and wrote a few of those types. And they've done very well.
Well, they sure have, because you hit the Amazon Top 100 bestsellers list.
Yeah, the Red Death series, I just released the second one, so Severed Press is the publisher of that one. And then I just wrote another one that's kind of obsession, possession, and ghostly revenge that was just released by Voodoo Press, and it's called The Haunting of Black Tower Mansion. It's kind of a cross between The Shining and Haunting of Hill House. So if you like Stephen King, you would like that one.
Listen, I read Stephen King's The Shining whenever I was a kid. I mean, when it first came out, and I was, super psychic, but I didn't know what it was. I'm in third generation psychic. And so I'm reading it. And so my only point of reference to what a psychic was red rum, red rum, red rum. And Carrie from Carrie.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of, just give us a little backstory about the last one you mentioned, the haunting of what do you call it?
The Haunting of Black Tower Mansion.
I'm already scared.
Yeah, well, it's basically it goes back and forth over about a century and a half, where an event that took place in the gold rush days comes forward when all the descendants of the characters that it involved originally move in the same circles and get back together with each other in this big mansion that this original person had built from his gold rush, striking it rich. So it goes back and forth and tells what transpired to create this possession and all these terrible things, and a lot of really gory murders and things that are happening around the town and why they began. So it's pretty dark, but if you like dark suspense or dark horror like that, it's a good book for that.
Is it fiction or nonfiction?
Oh, it's fiction for sure.
Wow. This is going to be a weird question. Did you name one of the characters after your son?
I did not, but I did in one of the other books.
Okay, I literally just heard that. That's why I'm asking. And I have a feeling, Debra, not to turn this into a psychic thing, but I have a feeling you're going to sell a screenplay or sell one of the things that is turned into a movie, and you're going to make bank.
Well, I would like that.
You're going to. And what's your connection to Florida?
Oh, my brother's in Florida. He's down there. We're just getting ready to retire, and he's been down there for quite a few years now.
I'm excited for you.
Excellent. That sounds good. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're so welcome. Now,
well, first, Eddie, let's take a real quick break for one of our sponsors. It's going to be just about 15 seconds, but we are going to take a quick break. And this is Debra Robinson. You might want to go to her website, debrarobinson.net, and check out all her books. You can also go to Amazon, and we have a lot more to talk about. So I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
And this is Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie on Universal Broadcasting. Be right back. Today's show is sponsored by Adventures Unlimited Press. Take your mind on a literary journey and go to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from our famed experts featured right here on Truth Be Told. That's adventuresunlimitedpress.com. Now, back to the show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Eddie Connor.
And I'm Tony Sweet.
Our guest today for this hour is Debra Robinson. She is a psychic. Or Reb, that's right. She is a psychic. She is a paranormal researcher. She is an author. She is a singer, songwriter. I mean,
you go, girl.
You do everything that's right-brained. I love that.
Well, I don't know. I just kind of ran with it all. All the things that I was most attracted to, I just kind of let it take over my life, and I've just kind of been involved with it that way. And I've had a pretty happy life, but sometimes I think, the universe balances things, and so I've got some negative in there as well, and I've tried to turn it as positive as I can. I know it's uncomfortable sometimes for radio show hosts and people like that to talk about these terrible tragedies, and yet that's what we're all made of. We all have a story, and I've met so many people, just from this Haunted Life book that have written to me from, everywhere, Australia and all over the world, saying, I'm so glad you put that all down because I can't talk to anybody or whatever, and it's nice to hear that everybody suffers something,
right?
Just at varying degrees,
It's so funny. I love that you said that. Two things I've loved everything you said. That's the truth. But one of the things you said that struck me, which I think is so smart for anybody, and that is you took those experiences that you had that are paranormal, psychic, and all of the other kinds of extraordinary experiences, and you wrote them down. You wrote them down. You put them in chronological order. There is something about the act of doing that makes us as intuitives feel sane. That makes us feel grounded.
Absolutely. Not to mention the therapeutic value.
Oh.
I mean, my gosh, if you go through something bad enough, just a daily spell of writing down a paragraph about what happened. It just really, really helps you. I think it helps your soul, it helps your spirit, I think, and it also, like you said, when you're dealing with things that are otherworldly, you feel, sometimes like you're losing your mind. You
Right.
really do.
Yeah.
And, when you're a rational person, intelligent, rational, decent person, you're trying to make sense of all this. And I think the writing is really, really therapeutic for even people that aren't dealing with psychic abilities.
I think so too. It keeps you in that grounded place, but at the same time, it does something so that not only do you not think you're crazy. The first thing I ever wrote and was sold there was two things. Yay, it was $50. What the hell? But one of
Hey, a sale's a sale.
yeah, that's true. I got my residual check. It's a penny. But guess what? I'm getting paid to write. But I was the ghost experience that I had whenever I was a kid. So my mom asked me when I was 37, I think. She said, what story did you write? And I said, well, I feel a little weird telling you. She's like, no, well, what was it? What happened? I said, well, it's an experience I had as in my childhood. And I never told anybody. There was a time, Deborah, was this the same with you? You did not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. Just couldn't.
So you feel, you're healthy, you've got some kind of a good heart about you, but you can't talk about these things. So I never talked about it. I never talked about this ghost with anybody in my family. So I said, well, Mom, I'll just send you the story. You can read it, and then you can tell me if you think I'm crazy or not. She said, well, just tell me what the F it is. And I said, well, I had an experience on Grandma's front porch one time during a rainstorm. She said, oh, you talk about old man Johnson?
Oh, you're kidding.
And I was like, what? And that's the first time. I was 37 years old. It was the first time we ever talked about it. And she's like, oh, yeah. Then she goes into a litany of experiences she had with them, too. But when you write them down, they're real. You come into some kind of a balance, and there is the healing that takes place. But I feel like you're also making room for more experiences to come to
Right.
you so that
That's
you can
true.
share the story and help other people feel that grounded, balanced alignment with spirit,
And
too.
every secret we keep, I feel it's just unhealthy. And even if it's something benign, like, a ghost experience, it just feels like it needs to come out. It needs to be put down. Whether you write it for yourself, for no one to ever read, or whatever, it needs to come out. And I think that it's healing.
I do, too. What's your least favorite thing about writing? What's your favorite thing about writing?
Oh, my least favorite is I find myself procrastinating a lot. I'll be like, okay, I've got to look up this research on this, and then I end up on, the Bon-Ton website or something looking at blouses or, so you just kind of get distracted. That's my least favorite, is that it's too easy to procrastinate and not meet your deadlines. My most favorite is just when it's all coming to you and you're just writing it, and you don't have to go back and make many changes because the sentences came out just as you had hoped they would. And those are the rare times, I would say, but they do happen.
And Deborah, it's so funny to me because I am a writer too. I write almost as much as I do readings, like you. And the thing that fascinates me is, just as spirits come to us, just as deceased relatives or loved ones come to us for clients, have you not noticed that the characters in your fiction books take on whole worlds of their own, and they come to you and they tell you what they're going to do in the book sometimes before you get a chance to direct them?
Absolutely. And you know what? I was told by several editors who really know their stuff. I'm basically new to this kind of writing, just having been writing now for 3 years. They told me that once your characters start doing what you don't really want them to do or what you hadn't planned for them to do, you have got a good situation going, a good book going. Because that's what they do. They take on their own lives whenever they're really real people.
Yep.
So that's how it works.
I love that you said that, but that's the first I've ever heard that. So thank you for sharing it. It makes me feel like I'm,
Sure.
it makes me feel sophisticated and smart.
I would say you're on the right track if your characters are saying, no, we're not going to do that, we're doing this.
Yeah.
Well, Deborah, you know, the previous guest we had on, she was talking about a lot of her books are of true experiences and
Yes.
going into haunted houses and dealing with entities like face to face. Have you done that besides growing up in the haunted house? Have you thought about going and clearing, help people clear houses of spirits?
Yes, I have done that, and I talk about some of that in my first two books with Llewellyn Worldwide were nonfiction. They were all true stories. That's The Haunted Life, A Haunted Life, and The Dead Are Watching. Those are all true experiences and everything. And then I kind of delved into the fiction end of things as well. So on the first two, I kind of tell some of the stories and things that happen. You know, my thing is, and I listened to Debbie talk a little bit, and she's great, and we share the same publisher on those nonfiction books, but basically, I am a big believer in you have to be really wary of what you're doing, because if you don't, if you're not well versed in protection and things like that, I mean, you can attract things. You can get yourself involved over your head and not know how to get rid of it. You can buy Debbie's book, and that would help. But
Yeah.
but you know, there are things out there that people are on a lark. Oh, let's go ghost hunting. And I'm just not a big believer. I think that you need to be wary of it, and you need to be aware of there are dangerous things too.
So, Deborah, you're my new friend. Let me ask you a question.
Eddie's mad because I want to go and do some.
I'm not mad.
Well, no.
But let me finish, though.
Okay.
I'm going
I'll
to talk.
let you finish. Go ahead.
We're the
Go
old
ahead.
gay
Go
couple
on.
here.
Go ahead.
So Tony's like, let's go to an insane asylum and look for ghosts. And
Well, the other thing is that whenever you are sensitive to this stuff, he might not see things, and you're going to see them. So you're going to be the one that's scared. You know
Exactly.
You know what?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm hoping.
Yeah, he wants to get me screaming like a stuck pig and running
That
like
makes
a big
for good
girl.
TV, though.
The only
Well,
time
that's the thing. You know, I had a friend that wanted
I'm
to
just
go. I
kidding.
can't remember where she went exactly. It was one of the big ones down in Kentucky. One of the big
oh, hell
sanitariums or
no.
whatever.
No. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, she was like, "Oh, I want to go," and I said, "You know, you probably really should be careful, and you know, you might as well take all the accoutrements, you know, the holy water and everything, and get yourself as prepared as you can be as like a newbie going into a place like this,
I'd
you
bring
know."
me a witch
and she
doctor.
just insisted she was going to go, you know. So I said, "Okay, well, you know, you need the St. Michael prayer, and you need all the stuff that
Write
can
that
keep
down.
you as safe as you can be, you know." And she went down there, and here somebody spoke to her right, you know, in her ear,
Oh.
and it was in the dark, and she ran towards, like, she was on an upper floor, and she almost fell down the stairs.
Oh God.
I mean, so, you know, there are things
Yeah.
that particularly get excited about scaring somebody who doesn't know that they're there, or doesn't believe that they're there.
Okay,
So all right.
That's the way
so
I feel about
we
it
wrote,
anyway.
that's the way I feel about it, too. Thank you for validating my feelings.
Well, we'll do all the protections. We'll say the St. Michael's prayer.
Who's going to do your protection for you? I ain't doing it.
Yes.
I'll take something with
You better,
I'll take my Pooh
better
Bear.
bring you a 5-gallon slop bucket filled with holy water.
I'm telling you, you got to
go-
use it for cologne.
Yeah.
Well, you know that. Well, also that makes a great point because we've talked about this many times about the Ouija board. When I was a kid, we used. Well, I didn't. My brothers and sisters used to play with it, and I think a lot of people don't realize the risk it has to open up corridors and portholes for
Yes.
all kinds of spirits. And when you said, didn't you say you actually dealt with?
Yes.
And so-
That's what started the haunted house thing,
When you were,
I think.
yeah, when you were a kid, right?
So you think that's actually what opened it for the spirits?
Well,
Yes.
you know,
to be so
many people discount that now, and in fact, many of them make fun of those of us who believe or had an experience where something seemed to start up awfully coincidentally right after using one. So,
Right.
you know, I am not one to try to change other people's beliefs or whatever, and there are many people who think they're the greatest thing ever, call them spirit boards or whatever, and they try to communicate with things. What I'm saying is I believe there's the light and there's the dark side.
Thank
you.
And I believe the dark side will pretend to be something of the light
That's
and
right.
Char
tell
even
you it's a
says
little
that.
child or
Yeah.
it's this or it's that, so that you have sympathy. And then you know, it's more and more creating a situation where, you know, you are emotionally entangled with it, and then you've got problems. You know, this is just my personal beliefs because I've experienced that. So, you know, I wouldn't say that everyone's going to believe that, and some people will just poo-poo that and completely think I'm crazy, but I'm telling you from my own experience, I am very wary of it, and I would recommend any parents that their kid wants one, I wouldn't allow them to get one. I just wouldn't. So yeah, I'm pretty adamant about that.
I am too. I'm with you. I don't think you're trying to persuade anybody. I think you're actually doing a service by encouraging them not to play with it. Unless you just hate your kid and they live by themselves, then get them a Ouija board.
Like I don't want to buy no damn birthday present.
But
I know, but some people they really, there are books written on how to use it safely, and more power to them. But I'm just saying, from personal experience, I would not do it, and would not recommend anyone to do it, because I know what I've gone through, and I think that there's something dark involved at times. I really do believe that.
Speaking of something dark involved, we're still talking about Tony here. When we, do you also feel, this just psychically popped in my head, and I feel like it's valid, and it is this is the question, Debra. If you're depressed, if you're sad, if you're having a bad month and you feel like you can't get out of the funk of it, don't you think that's a bad time to go looking for ghosts?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Why are you looking at me? I'm
telling
not having
you,
a bad day.
Here are my beliefs. My belief is the dark side, the best thing that you can do for them and what their ultimate goal is to make you destroy yourself.
Oh,
That's
Lord.
what they believe.
You're going
That's
first,
what
Debra.
I believe is going on. And so they win if they can get you to destroy the temple, is basically what, religion calls it, the temple of the body. So, I'm kind of leaning in that direction where you got to be wary of that stuff. And depression, is not fun on its best day, let alone going and messing with something where it could actually possibly, make that become bigger.
So stress, depression, anxiety, overwhelmment, exhaustion, not a good idea.
And I've heard that about that. So,
yeah.
Eddie, you're going first.
You'll see me in hell first, because I'm not doing it.
I'm right there with you, Eddie. I totally
That's
agree.
right.
I really do.
So,
Deborah, would you come out and hold my hand, please?
Sure, I would.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been to LA for a while. I'm ready for a trip.
Well, okay. Before Eddie, you ask your question, I want to talk about the dead or watching, because this is a historical piece, right?
It's actually got some more of my son's visits, kind of the second year of visits and things that he came back. There were a couple things that he did that were just completely, wow. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. If you got time, I'll tell you one little quick one.
Yeah,
please.
Okay, I was sitting here actually working on that book, finishing up the books. I had both of them kind of back to back, so I was working all the time on it, and basically that writing kept my mind off of all the terrible things. So that was another therapeutic thing about all that writing, But anyway, I was sitting here one night, and my son's dog was in the kitchen. It was a big old black lab, very old, and all of a sudden, I kept hearing all this scratching going on, and I thought, well, sometimes the dog, they lay up against the door. The door was closed. It's an old house. They lay up against the door, and, you'll hear them scratching or something like that. So I was so involved in what I was writing, I wasn't paying attention. So I heard the scratching. I kept hearing the scratching, and finally then there were 5 very loud knocks on the door. I mean, very loud.
Man.
And I thought, well, that's the dog again, scratching at something. You know how their leg will bump the door, and it sounds like knocking. So finally I thought, okay, I'm going to get up and check this out. And then all of a sudden, as I stood up, I heard the dog's toenails, it was a large dog, come from the far side of the kitchen over to the door. So I knew it wasn't the dog. So I opened the door, puzzled, and I said, James, is that you? Just feeling like it was him, And I looked up and looked down, and the dog's standing there looking at me, looking around. And I looked down below the doorknob, and there in the old wood, this 100-year-old oak door, it's darkened, with age, were the initials JS, which were his initials.
Oh,
wow.
And I said, now come on, that's not possible. But I heard all that scratching. And the thing is I think that if it would have been there before this, I would have noticed it.
Right.
Oh, God, yeah.
They're an inch high,
Wow. Yeah.
So they're
that's pretty
still
crazy.
there, and they're on the door. And I put that book tells about it, and those books tell about it and stuff. And I put a picture on my Facebook author page and stuff of the initials, and those are the kind of things. It's just craziness. You don't think that sort of thing can happen, and yet it does.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the stronger your belief in it, the greater the manifestations you can have. I really do believe that.
Yeah. Well, my son too was, he had the psychic streak.
Yeah.
I mean, so him and I have spent many, many hours, talking about religion and, the afterlife and things like that. So, he knew exactly what was going on. Another night I was sitting here, and this has been that first year and right afterwards that he died, when he still kept coming back, or he seemed to be coming back a lot. One night I was sitting here working on the book again, and I heard a thumping sound from the ceiling, and I looked up right here in my living room, and here comes a little tiny white feather floating down from the ceiling. And there's no feathers in this house except for a feather that he had brought me, a hawk feather that I keep on the mantle of the fireplace.
Oh.
And one time, when my mother died and James was sitting beside me at her funeral, we sat there and watched out of a clear blue sky a white feather slowly drift down and land on the grass of the, out in the country. And there were no trees around for birds or anything. We watched it come down and land. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I said, I think, Mom, your grandma's sending this. And we picked it up on our way out. So I thought, who better to use a feather to symbolize, this than him, because he knows that we knew that story together.
100%. That's for me, that's the way it works.
Yes,
I used to
absolutely.
get a lot of symbols and like little notices from the other side back in the day, but I don't get them as much. At least maybe I'm not aware of them as much.
You're probably a lot of people get them every day, all the time, but they are not on the frequency of receiving it.
Right.
But we do get them. We can if we just tune into it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, our time is run out, and again, we would like to invite you back.
Yeah,
There's so much more to talk about.
I know,
Yes, I'd love to come back.
we had a Debbie with Debbie Chestnut, and then we have Debra
I know.
Robinson. This has been one of my favorite shows in a long time. So you're a rock star too.
You are,
Thank
and please.
You guys are rock stars in my book.
Oh, thank you. I can sing a little bit. Nettie can dance. So there we go. So make sure you go to DebraRobinson.net. Check out all of her books. And I know you're a musician too. Where can people hear your music?
On my website, I have some CDs for sale. I have 2 CDs out that they're mostly a little bit of everything from pop to country and everything that I've written over the years. To pitch to publishers and who pitch them to, everyone from, I don't know. I don't even know they pitch them to everybody, but anybody who doesn't write their own songs, they pitch them to, and to movies and things like that. So you can get those on my website as well, or send me a note, and I'll make sure you can get those, or on Amazon.
Perfect. And the people that just tuning in, if you tuned in late, make sure you go back and on YouTube. This will be up on YouTube, the video, and also all of our podcasts will be on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and
iHeartRadio.
Yes, it will be. And we want to thank you, Debbie, so much, or Debra, excuse me. We're getting too many. Debra, for being on the show. And
too many of us.
I know. And thank you so much, and I appreciate you for being here. You're going to get another round of applause. Yay! All right, take care, my dear.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
take care. Bye.